Okay, David, here we are on the site of the southern extension of the Corris Railway.
Yep.
Progress has been very rapid in the last couple of months. And so how much, if you've got any idea, ballast and material has gone into the project so far?
A long time ago I did a calculation and we were looking at something like 20,000 tonnes.
Okay.
And we're within the last 1,000 tonnes now. Biggest problem is finding it. We were held up for a couple of years waiting for a source of material, and fortunately we've had it with the result of the New Davey Bridge scheme in Embankment, because the contractor had to build a temporary road across the floodplain to enable him to access the works, and at the end of the contract he's got to take it out again.
Right.
We're quite handy for him to get rid of it, and it's very useful for us too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I understand that there are various different sizes and types of aggregate that have gone into the extension.
Everything has to be graded. This material that we've had coming in is considered to be grade 1A under the design manual for roads and bridges. We have had some other material here which is slightly different. But again, it is still class 1. That came in the early days. We had a site in Dolgellau which we were using to create material. We literally had to quarry it, so we had to process it because if you don't, it's considered to be waste.
Okay.
And for waste you have to have a license.
Right.
To avoid having to go for a license, what we did was we processed it on site in Dolgellau and then carried it with a known grade to bring here.
Okay.
So that we avoided that problem.
Can you explain a little bit about the design of the embankment with regard to drainage and how it fits into the topography here currently?
Well, the whole of the site here is built on slide-long ground. If you just fill against it, all you do is create a slip plane, and it just goes down into the bottom of the valley. So what you have to do is cut shelves. The shelves are about 200 millimetres, 8 inches, 9 inches, something like that. Then you put a drainage layer over that. That needs to be 2 to 3 feet thick to stop the fines in the filling material migrating through to the drainage layer. You put a layer of geotextile over the top,
okay,
so that the water can go through, but it stops the bits of dust and the small stuff, because once that goes through, one, it clogs your drainage layer, so that doesn't work anymore, and when you lose your fine material, then eventually your bigger material becomes unstable.
Right, okay.
So you've got to try and make sure that they maintain the same as they used to.
So the stage we're at now, how much further have you got to go with regard to adding to height of the embankment?
Along this section we're somewhere in the right field, but what we are talking in terms of doing at the moment is just doing a rough level and using this site while we've got filling material available to use as a store.
Right.
We have what has been pretty accurately described as a ravine to fill in down there.
Yeah.
And then further on we may need some for doing a work around the bridge at Pontygoedwig.
Okay. After this embankment is completed, what is the next phase in terms of going past the water that's currently running through the culvert?
We have got a design which has been approved by the Welsh Government's highways people for extending the culvert, but when we applied for planning for that, the Natural Resources Wales were not happy with the intrusion into the floodplain. So at the moment what we're looking at is redesigning it so that we have a bridge going across rather than extending the culvert. It takes us a little bit away from the existing culvert, but we're still working up the design for that, and it will be a few months before we can say exactly what we plan
Sure.
to do.
So the abutments and the bridge would all then be on railway land and wouldn't be...
Technically there's a little bit on licensed highway land, but effectively we own all the land up to the river.
Right, okay.
And so it's all on our land, yeah, and we would be liable then for the bridge, whereas with the culvert extension, the Welsh Government was saying they would accept liability.
When did the work first start on this project, and how much time has gone into it subsequently?
Oh, how long have you got? We made the planning application to undertake this work in 2003.
Right.
It got caught by the consequences of the Great Heck Railway accident. As a consequence, all applications relating to road and rail interfaces were put on hold. We were caught in that. Eventually we got our indication that we would get our planning permission. First there had to be an assessment done by structural engineers to determine what level of protection we required. They eventually decided that it made no difference whether the railway was here or not, so that cleared us for getting planning permission. The other side of the culvert there is in the National Park. They had executive power. They didn't need to go to committee, but they took a year longer to make the approval. They gave the same conditions for both sides. We have undertaken various measures to ensure that we've complied with those. Work started at that end because in 2012 the gas main through the valley was renewed.
Okay.
On a different alignment. It affected our land. The contractors wanted a site for placing suitable material that they were excavating out of the road to put the gas main in. So we offered them a site. At the end of their contract, using that material, they built the first part of our embankment for us next to the yard.
Right.
That was what we called phase one. Phase two was going to be the exact opposite end, which was in the National Park. That was a cut and fill job where we had to cut into the existing hillside and then fill into a bit of a depression using the same material. And we built that because of weather conditions, partly in 2015, but we finished it in 2016. This part we started just as lockdown came into effect in 2020. So we were limited in who we could use here. Everybody had to be within 5 miles of the site. And so between volunteers and contractors, keeping 2 meters apart, which in times was a bit difficult, we started by building the gabions down the bottom.
Okay, for the tow.
Yeah. And then we came up so far while we had material from Dolgellau, but then the landowner, it's 2 people who were the landowner, and they fell out big time. So for a couple of years the material was denied to us. So we were desperate for something, and this came along. Yeah, fantastic. All that we could ever want.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So when do you hope finally to turn a wheel in anger?
Well, we've got to build this bridge once we've sorted out a design. I would imagine that's not going to be less than about 2 years.
Right.
And the idea is then to lay track down this way and through the site here, provide a small run-round facility so that we can extend trains down this end. There won't be public access at this end because we don't have car parking. When we go beyond again, we've got to get past the level crossing at Pontivans. That's a bit of a challenge in itself, but others are getting around that, so we want to use those as a precedent to head for a site further down the valley where we can have a car park and other facilities so that we can bring people in that end. And then the idea is that you've got effectively a park and ride to take people to Corris.
So here we can see the extent of the height that you've had to come up.
Yep.
Other than the difficulty of obtaining the fill material, what would you say has been the most difficult part of the project?
Weather. No, seriously. The fill material that we were getting from Dolgellau, really we could only process it when it was relatively dry.
Okay.
As soon as it got wet, it clogged up all the machinery that we were using to grade it. Then when you come to roll it, it sticks to the drum and just picks up, and it's no good. We've still had that problem with this fill material. If it's too wet and it's being excavated from a floodplain, so as part of the work it has been taken out from the floodplain out through water. It arrived here so saturated you couldn't really touch it. The machines just turned it into a jelly. So you had to leave it for a while to dry out. And what we were trying to do was work different sites, parts of the site, so that we always had somewhere dry enough to be able to work with. We did have a couple of weeks where it was just so wet you couldn't do anything with it, so we just had to stop.
Well, we're fortunate in that you've had a local contractor who's been so flexible and so willing.
Yes, well, it does help that his son is a prominent member on the railway. He's a driver on the Telflyn here, and he has been firing on the Vale of Rydal as a holiday job when he was a student. So
here we are at the culvert, David, that you spoke about before.
Yep.
So what sort of size bridge would be needed to go over the top of this obstacle?
What we would have to do is build it with a long enough span so that we don't imply any load on the culvert.
Okay.
The culvert itself is quite strong, but the wing walls on the outside, with the sloping coping that you can see, they are not designed to take any more loading than they've already got.
Okay.
So on the initial plan, what we were planning to do was to build new walls behind the existing ones, and build a retaining wall where that existing head wall is.
Okay.
But the highways people didn't like that, so this is why they wanted it extend the embankment, and but the intrusion into the floodplain. The river used to run around here before the culvert was built, and they are considering this part of the floodplain, and they don't want it intruded into.
Okay.
We do have planning permission to do a certain amount of filling, which will intrude into the floodplain, and we intend to use that. But what we might have to do, as we've done over there, is have to build a retaining wall of some sort at the base, so and then fill above that.
So ideally this is something that could be achieved in a single span, but it needs the abutments to be quite a way away from the existing culvert.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a balancing act between structures and flood protection and environment.
Right.
In the end, we have our planning permission, and we will find some way of getting around it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
Oh, no problem. Okay.
If you would like to support this project, or the railway in general, why not consider becoming a member? For a very reasonable annual fee, you will receive a quarterly magazine and the opportunity for 4 free trips on the railway per year. More details on our website.
Have you got anything else you want to say?
Rhubarb?